So a lot of my long-term subscribers to the channel will know I am a massive history buff. I actually have a degree in history, and World War II history is actually one of my favourite areas. I've always been pretty obsessed with it since I was a kid, probably thanks to movies and video games. You know, when you're just a child, you're super influenced by that stuff, and I've always just found it super interesting. So I get why so many people are fascinated by it. They join these online communities to talk about the history, talk about the weaponry, the tanks, and I really love that stuff as well. But since I began my YouTube channel and I've been more online in places like Reddit, something I've seen a lot more is a lot of apologetics for Nazi Germany's actions during the war. So the biggest falsehood they push is the myth of the clean Wehrmacht. Now the Wehrmacht are essentially the German military, but the myth is that most of the war crimes during the war were perpetrated by the SS and not the standard German military. So as you'll see in this video and my interactions on various online communities, this myth is still heavily prevalent, and people say really concerning things like those in the German military who weren't in the SS were essentially just fighting for their families and fighting for their homeland, despite the fact they invaded multiple sovereign countries, perpetrated loads and loads of war crimes, helped partake in the Holocaust, but because they weren't as fanatical as the SS, somehow they get off the hook. So mainly I'm going to be focusing on the comment sections of World War II pics and German World War II pics from Reddit. But this is a topic I'm super interested in, so if you know about any other online communities, I heard World of Tanks is pretty bad for this, please link it in the comments and maybe link any information you have on it. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video. So before we dive into the comments, I just want to outline properly the clean Wehrmacht myth, just to really contextualize this conversation I'm going to have. The myth of the clean Wehrmacht is a fictitious notion that the regular German armed forces were not involved in the Holocaust or other war crimes during World War II. The myth denies the culpability of the German military command in the planning and preparation of war crimes, even where the perpetration of war crimes and the waging of a war of extermination, particularly in the USSR, where the Nazis viewed the population as subhumans, ruled by Jewish Bolsheviks, has been acknowledged, they are ascribed to the party soldiers of the SS and not the regular German military. The myth's formation began at the International Military Tribunal held between the 20th of November 1945 and the 1st of October 1946 in Nuremberg. Franz Halder and other Wehrmacht leaders signed the General's Memorandum entitled The German Army from 1920 to 1945, which laid out its key elements. And this was an attempt to downplay their involvement in war crimes, so Western powers became increasingly concerned with the growing Cold War and wanted to rearm West Germany against the Soviets. In 1950, the West German Chancellor and former officers met to discuss West Germany's rearmament and agreed upon the Himmerod Memorandum. This memorandum laid out the conditions under which West Germany would be rearmed, their war criminals must be released, the defamation of the German soldier must cease, and foreign public opinion of the Wehrmacht must be transformed. Dwight D. Eisenhower, who'd previously described the Wehrmacht as Nazis, changed his mind to facilitate rearmament. The British became increasingly reluctant to pursue further trials and released already convicted criminals early. So you see how the Allies have a role to play in this myth, essentially because they see the threat of the Soviet Union as one that is so great during the Cold War. They helped to rehabilitate a lot of German war criminals and people who oversaw one of the worst genocidal regimes in all of history. So now we're going to look at various posts on World War II pics and German World War II pics. I will just say I'm a sub of the World War II pics subreddit. There are tons and tons of totally normal people in there. There are actually tons and tons of people who, when they see these Nazi apologetics, they always debunk it. But as you'll also see from these posts, there's actually a lot of upvotes of these Nazi apologetics. And it's super concerning that people who supposedly just love this historical time period will really play into these myths that the Wehrmacht and Rommel were somehow completely innocent of the genocide and the war crimes pushed by the Nazi military. So let's get a taste. So a recent post, here is a picture of a Nazi being taken in by soldiers. Looks like he may have taken a few to the face before his surrender was accepted. So here is a Nazi with various punches to the face. So someone comments, I would prefer Wehrmacht soldier instead of a Nazi. And then someone says, dude, we're on Reddit, everyone is a Nazi, even me, especially guys wearing Nazi uniforms and fighting for a Nazi cause, 15 downvotes. So then this guy links the myth of the clean Wehrmacht and he gets downvoted again, -12. So some other guy says, not all German soldiers were Nazis. Some random retard, I ever heard about the myth of the clear Wehrmacht. He's mocking this myth as a historical fact, which is indeed true. So this guy replies again, I'll bet that as soon as people stop fighting the not all German soldiers were Nazis bullshit, we're going to start hearing garbage like, hey, the Nazis were actually the good guys. They just wanted to protect us from them. I jumped in with another guy who was getting upvotes. So someone said, I'm not defending the regime. I'm arguing to try and get people to understand that There were soldiers who didn't commit war crimes and obeyed the Geneva Convention, soldiers who were only fighting for their families. There were people, not evil robotic soldiers. Of course, people now wouldn't see it that way because the losers remained quiet for 70 years. So I commented, fought for their families by invading independent countries or slaughtering Jews, Romanis, gays, disabled, Slavs and communists, and of course I get the downvotes. So in this guy's mind, somehow because Nazis and Wehrmacht soldiers were people, it really absolves them of being evil. But I think a lot of people would understand and would argue what is one of the most sinister and disturbing parts of Nazi Germany is how there wasn't a massive pushback to the Nazi rule once they got in. Of course, you had super brave people like the White Rose student movement who were publishing anti-Nazi propaganda in 1944 and were promptly executed for it. But by and large, once Hitler got in and crushed the communist movements, there wasn't a massive opposition to him. And again, that's what is disturbing. We don't forget the Nazis were people. We remember that, and that's why we're so disturbed. You've seen those pictures of, you know, men and women who were in the German military laughing it up while they were working at a concentration camp. Again, the disturbing part is how could these people have such cognitive dissonance that they are not hugely disturbed by working at a camp which exterminates primarily Jews? So in another comment, he was sharing a similar sentiment. He said, unfortunately, people will never see it that way and treat everyone as if they are Hitler themselves. I've tried arguing with people and it's pointless. I understand that argument, history is told by the winners, and the Wehrmacht was on the wrong side. So I said, good Wehrmacht and good guy Rommel are both myths. Yes, the history is told by the winners, and the British popularised both these myths after the war, and I just explained how, because it was about Cold War considerations. And then again, he goes on to say, I was trying to say that not every single soldier who's in the Wehrmacht was a diehard Nazi. I'm not saying that the Wehrmacht never did anything wrong, but again, see, this is upvoted as well. So here's another one. Final resting place of an unknown English soldier near Arnhem Bridge, 1945. Clearly it's written in German, so a British soldier was essentially buried by someone in the German army. So someone writes, he must have been buried by a German soldier, as this is written in German, not Dutch. Someone replies, which is actually kind of nice, isn't it? And then someone else says, humans on both sides, complete arseholes sometimes, sensible people sometimes. And someone else replies, in the end, the basic grunt was either your average Joe or Heinz on either side. Everyone just wanted to survive the war and go home to their family. Now the political leaders who start this whole mess, that's another story. So all this stuff is upvoted, and then someone says the Wehrmacht committed a lot of war crimes in World War II and quite often assisted the SS in public shootings and executions. Now that had a couple upvotes, but not as many as the rest. Now someone else wrote in the thread, it's something to be realised that the average soldier was fighting for its country, not its leaders. Most soldiers in the Wehrmacht didn't fight for the Nazi ideology. They weren't Nazis, didn't have affiliations within the Nazi party, they were just German soldiers. Of course there are people affiliated with the Nazi party within the Wehrmacht, but that doesn't make the Wehrmacht a Nazi entity. There were even special units just for Nazi party affiliated people, the SS being one of these examples. In the end, all the soldiers are human, and respecting the dead, even if it's from the enemy side in your perspective, is a very human thing to do. So this is something that constantly annoys me, and I think it is perpetrated by how the Germans often treated the British and the English a lot better than they treated a lot of other groups, because Hitler didn't hate England, he didn't hate the English. Germans and English didn't necessarily hate each other. You know, I've argued in the past that the only difference in a lot of the ideology of both these countries was the Nazis were just far more extreme, because anti-Semitism, demonisation of certain groups like Romanis, like Slavs, is prevalent throughout Western Europe. It's not a uniquely Nazi thing to do. So I'm not surprised that the Germans treated the English with a lot of respect, and why these people might think there's some sort of, common humanity there. Because if you read about the German war in Eastern Europe, it was absolutely brutal. If they even took prisoners, they treated them awfully. They killed many innocent people. They killed many POWs, and why did they? They saw the Slavs as subhuman, and they also saw them as controlled by the Jews. I spoke about cultural Marxism and cultural Bolshevism, this ideology that gained prominence in the 1920s after the Russian Revolution. And in the 1930s, the German curriculum had things like the Elders of the Protocol of Zion, which essentially said that Jews were responsible for all these communist movements to try and take over the world and undermine Western society. So the Nazis saw the Slavs as subhumans run by other subhumans. So it's unlikely you'd see a Soviet being treated with the same respect as an English person. So yes, like people were saying, maybe your average Joe in Britain and your average Joe in Germany might have treated each other with a bit of respect, but your average Joe in the Soviet Union is not getting that respect. And even if we take the argument that the average Wehrmacht soldier isn't a fanatical Nazi, just like many people in Western Europe, he is probably going to be a massive anti-Semite, and he's probably going to believe these ideas about the Jews running Russia because of the communist revolution. And you don't have to be the most fanatical Nazi to hate Jews, because many people around Western Europe despised them. Same picture, another thread, so they are all human, just in a different uniform. Not according to the Nazis, not everyone was human, someone replies. Someone else says, I suppose it's easy to look at Germany altogether as evil mustache-twirling baddies. Nothing is ever black and white in my opinion. Someone else replies again, they literally consider Slavs and Jews subhuman. How clear do you want it to be? They would never make a grave like this for a Soviet soldier or a Jewish civilian, just what I was saying. Then this guy replies, yes, the party ideology was indeed like you described, but let me give you an example. If you're a soldier and your fatherland cries for help, you answer the call no matter your political affiliation. Again, the logic behind this is just absolutely crazy. He's essentially saying that Germany, who probably are the best example of mustache-twirling bad guys in that they believed a completely insane ideology and were fanatic about it, he's saying that was okay because when your fatherland asks you to fight in the military, that's what you should do, and that's not black and white. But let's not forget, the whole Nazi economy to start with was propped up on the invasion and plundering of Europe. All these soldiers who fought in that were complicit. Many of them would not have had a problem during the initial stages of the war where they were constantly winning, taking over more land, which propped up the Nazi regime and spread it around Europe, which led to the further spread of the Holocaust. Just a bonus one to end. Someone posted a picture of their grandfather. So my grandfather Joseph on the right and his friend Paul, both were drafted in 1940 and served on the Eastern Front in the Middle Army Group. Like many others in my grandfather's platoon, Paul died during Operation Bagration 1944. So at least this comment got downvoted. Again, at least some people pushing back against this. So it is really quite sad that the Nazis were known for such horrendous atrocities. Men like your grandfather and his friend were just men loyal to their country. They likely played no part in the Holocaust, yet they are held in a negative light due to the zealots within their military. History will only remember soldiers of the Wehrmacht as Nazis, and they are therefore branded by the hatred of the name. Good men fought and died on both sides. So someone quotes at him a bit from Band of Brothers, the book. So, hey, this guy says he's not a Nazi, all of Germany, and I haven't met one Nazi yet. So again, it's pretty disturbing that there's so much historical revisionism that people are saying there were good guys on both sides. Now, in my opinion, this is, one of the worst wars of all time. There are numerous human rights violations on all sides, on a scale that you have not seen in modern warfare. But the difference is that the Nazis were invading a ton of other countries to impose this evil ideology, commit this horrible ethnic cleansing that is still so shocking today. We talk about it a lot. And I don't have the same opinion as many people. I think a lot of the European countries had similar views to the Nazis. The difference with the Nazis is that they just took it to an absolute extreme, and they had an authoritarian structure which allowed these things to be effectively implemented. So I'm not without nuance when discussing the Second World War, but there's no way I'm going to say that there were good people on both sides. I guess I respect the point some people are trying to make that a lot of these people were conscripts and products of their time. But I think with people like the White Rose movement, who were just these kids in Nazi Germany, standing up to the Nazis, they showed you could stand up to them. And the problem is, when you actually read and listen to accounts of lots of people in Germany during the initial stages of the war, they were happy with how it was going. They supported Hitler. Hitler had promised that he would make Germany great again, and he was making Germany better if you were white and ethnic German. And he was doing that by robbing and killing everyone who wasn't. And the economy was being propped up on the looting of Europe. So if you were a soldier propping up that regime, carrying out its orders, helping facilitate the Holocaust, committing war crimes against the British, against the Americans, and of course, on a massive scale, the Soviets, regardless if you are 100% a fanatical Nazi, like the people in the SS, it doesn't really matter. If you are carrying out the orders of the Nazis, if you are doing everything they want, if you're expanding the Nazi empire where the Nazi party will have direct control, how am I meant to accept that you are any different from the SS just because you're not as fanatical as them? So again, this Nazi revisionism needs to end, and it's super problematic to see it spring up in these communities. But I'm getting worried that the more we go away from the Second World War, the more we go away from the Holocaust, the more the far right and neo-Nazis make their resurgence across Europe and America. I'm worried more prevalence of comments like this in online forums and internet communities really helps rehabilitate the Nazis' image. So like I said before, if you have any more examples of this, please let me know in the comments. If you like the video, please like, maybe subscribe. We're nearly on 10k and I'm super excited to hit that milestone. So yeah, if you like the channel, please subscribe to it. If you want to follow me on social media, follow me at The Tabernacle on Twitter, that is the main one, but also on Facebook and Instagram. Like you've seen, I'm pretty active on Reddit, so my personal Reddit is u/TommyCahill1995. My subreddit is r/TheTabernacle. Check out my Patreon and my WordPress in the description, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.